Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy! You could never look at my secret. Oh no! Suddenly, I don't leave me! Let's begin. Indeed.
All right. Sorry for the late start, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside chat. Sorry. And today we have a very interesting guest. I'm sorry. I should have asked you how to pronounce your name. Is it Salih Hudayar? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, we pronounce it as Sully, like the guy off of Monsters Inc.
Oh, Sully. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Sully. Cool. Okay, I can do that. And you are the official representative of East Turkistan and its people working to end Chinese occupation. Seems like
Yes.
a really that's a big deal, I think. And I'm first of all humbled by you coming on our show to talk about this stuff. And it's actually a really interesting topic because we normally deal with things that are like divorce and child custody, and we acknowledge or recognize that there are like bigger things happening, but we never really thought we'd get close to them. So first of all, I'd like to say, Sully, thank you so much for your patience, and while I got this situation worked out, and I apologize to you and to the audience for the late start. It's something that I try my best not to cause, but we had some issues with the software that I needed to go to like the support teams to get them to help me address it. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on our show. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do, and how you learned about us, Honey Badger Radio. What's that about?
Yeah, so I actually let me answer the second part of the question first, and then go into who I am. I actually listened to one of your podcasts about male masculinity, and this I found it kind of like relevant given the fact that under the authoritarian Chinese occupation. Initially, our men were the ones that were facing the brunt of the persecution because the Chinese government felt threatened that they would rise up against the Chinese state before they started implementing the overall mass internment and genocide campaign that engulfed our entire society, including women, children, and the elderly. So that's how I learned about Honey Badger Radio. And then now answering the first part of the question, coming back to who I am. My name is Salih Hudayar. I currently serve as the foreign minister of the East Turkistan government in exile, which is an official entity that represents the people of East Turkestan on the international stage and their national liberation or national independence movement. I myself actually grew up, was born in East Turkestan, lived there until I was 7 years old, and was forced into exile due to the Chinese government's repressive policies that culminated right before before they started implementing the official genocidal stage of its rule. I grew up in Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma. Spent most of my life there. I had a goal of becoming a military officer. That was my childhood dream, was to become a military officer and one day, return to liberate East Turkestan. Unfortunately, because of I also joined the Oklahoma Army National Guard, and I was doing ROTC while I was at the university. And after about 2.5 years, during a field training exercise, I had an emergency appendectomy. And then when they did a scan of my, body, they discovered that I had, polycystic kidney disease. So that permanently, disqualified me from military service and ended my, military career short. So then I ended up studying international studies and politics, and I started losing contact with all of my relatives, my grandparents, cousins, and so forth in East Turkestan.
And they were in East Turkistan. You sort of like stopped being able to reach them, is what you're saying?
Yeah, by the summer of 2017. I think June 2017 was the last time I spoke to anyone in East Turkestan, and that was my grandfather. And he euphemistically, in a coded word, said, "Don't call us anymore. I don't know you. Don't bother us. I'm too old to go to school." That school is the euphemism for the so-called re-education camps, which are in fact concentration camps. So I founded the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement with like-minded Uyghurs and Kazakhs, young Uyghurs and Kazakhs like myself, who grew up in the United States, to advocate for East Turkestan's political and human rights, to advocate for an end to the ongoing genocide, and ultimately the restoration of East Turkestan's independence. In April of 2019, I was initially appointed as the the ambassador for the United States to the East, for the East Turkestan government in exile. And then in November of 2019, at the 8th General Assembly of the East Turkestan government in exile, I was initially elected as the prime minister, despite my unwillingness to take up such a position. But because of my linguistic abilities, my youth, and my activism, I became popular in the diaspora. So I was compelled to undertake that position. And then I served as the prime minister of the East Turkestan government in exile until November 2023, when I stepped down and a new government leadership was elected. And I was subsequently appointed as the foreign minister of the new government in November 2023.
Hmm. Wow, that's a lot. So, let me. I got some notes. I had to take some notes. So, you have a focus on the situation of the Uyghurs and also Kazakhs, right? In China, or under Chinese occupation. This is a very, I mean, that's like the scope of what you are dealing with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So East Turkestan is the name of our country. Historically, for the past 1,500 years, we've been known as either Turkestan, and then since like the 1730s as East Turkestan, because there was a split. The Russians took over the western part, and we therefore became East Turkestan around the 1730s. In 1949, the Soviet Union under Stalin helped Mao assassinate our key leadership, and then help the Chinese communists invade East Turkestan 11 days after Mao declared the People's Republic of China. And then in December 22nd, 1949, our independent state, the East Turkestan Republic, was forcibly overthrown, initiating the ongoing, Chinese occupation of East Turkestan, which is in its 76th year, or about to enter its 76th year.
And okay, so there's a lot of stuff I want to ask you about. So, okay, first of all, let's get into like where we kind of like have, let's say, similar interests. Okay, I mean, I have an interest in this personally because I am very critical of the Chinese government, but I don't have a lot of, like, I don't have an opportunity to talk to people that are this close to, sort of what's going on. I mean, considering you had family that were affected by this. But I'm curious what is your take on how this situation overlaps with or is related to men's issues?
Well, it's very relevant given the fact that China is actually, as I stated, it's because of our masculinity. This was the initial phase, was that they targeted our men,
And
and
how did they target the men? I'm curious. Was it just like they just went after the men first, kind of a thing, or was there
well,
something else?
initially they tried to criminalize, everything, masculine about us. So, for example,
Mm,
the fact that, facial hair, we have beards. Most Chinese people, unfortunately, can't even grow beards. Chinese men, most of them can't, grow a real beard. So they criminalized, beards for anyone under 65. In fact, one of the reasons that you are sent to a concentration camp was that if you had a beard, if you owned any weightlifting equipment, so if you have some dumbbells,
a home gym, yeah.
yeah, home gym, or if you are a young person and you're under 65 and you're attending a gym, oh, you're working out not to look healthy or not to, impress the ladies, but you're working out specifically to rebel against the state. So this is when they started targeting initially the men, around 2014. By 2016, around 200,000 or so men between the ages of 15 and 45, those that are prone to be of, so-called military age, they were initially targeted under, China claimed that it was fighting against terrorism and that it was facing, a so-called terrorist threat. And the international community bought onto that lie because, they're like, oh, well, these people
Well,
are
it's about
majority
men,
Muslim. Yeah,
so yeah, it's easy to do that, right?
yeah. So this is the phase that, and then after China realized that, the international community is not condemning this, they're like, let's just target the entire population. Um, like, for example, in our country, historically, our men, we used to, carry knives. We used to have knives. Like every man had his own little knife.
Dagger.
Yeah, knives have been completely banned across East Turkestan. In fact, in East Turkestan, every family is allowed one kitchen knife and only, and that kitchen knife is chained to your kitchen wall, kitchen onto the walls, and it has a QR code etched into it, and that QR code has your entire family's data. Like, by
Hmm.
scanning that QR code, they can find all of your, family, your relatives, everything. So if you were to, if that knife was to be found, somewhere else, or if it was used to, attack Chinese military personnel or so forth, your entire family would be targeted. Um, so this is the thing. And right now, further on top of that, our men are being enslaved, especially our young men. They're being enslaved in forced labor factories. They're being forcibly relocated out of East Turkestan, while our women are being forced to marry Chinese men. So this is another, brutality. And it is estimated, experts on organ harvesting estimate that anywhere from 25,000 to 50,000 Uyghurs, mostly men, are being killed every year as part of organ harvesting. And majority of the executions that happen in East Turkestan, which are in the thousands, disproportionately targets men. Officially, we have officially the Chinese government sentenced over 578,500 Uyghurs between anywhere from 5 years to life in prison for various crimes, for various alleged crimes. Just being an Uyghur is a crime, and the overwhelming majority of those that have been sentenced, over 70%, is again men, because again the Chinese government fears men, because they can resist, they can provide for their families. They're historically, men are, the most likely to resist, most likely to, um, you know push
be
back
critical of government and authority,
yeah.
and yes, yeah, that's why they get targeted. Yes. And it usually starts with sort of propaganda against men. And
Yeah.
that's why I thought it was really interesting that you're sharing something that sounds a lot like what's happening in a lot of Western countries as well. It's just it starts slow, and of course, it's how governments create essentially dependent serfs, whatever class it is. They attack the men first. So this is actually really really interesting and really relevant now that you explain it. So let's back up a little bit because I want to hear about these things point for point. So you said first they went after masculinity by essentially attacking the features of these men that differentiate them from the native sort of Chinese, right? So they say, oh,
Well,
these.
we are the native men, so
I
that's
mean, I mean, yeah, but
from
okay,
the
okay.
Chinese colonists. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially to differentiate from their team or their tribe, which is the Chinese people. They attack. They're trying to find ways to essentially criminalize men or pathologize them or make them appear, dangerous or scary or unappealing. Does that the way that this was done? I'm curious. Obviously, if you have like two different factions, they're gonna have like their team sort of like they have their own distinct traits that they support because they share them. Like the Chinese have their language, they have what they look like, their sort of ethnicity, their genetics, but in order to that's not quite enough to get people to essentially want to dehumanize you. The existence of those differences are probably not enough, but what you can do is you can make the men dangerous so that the women will be like more in support of having something done about that. Do you think that there was anything that was specifically targeting not just like the Chinese, but like the women of your own group to like make them? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, not really. I mean, for our own group, no, not really, because I mean, we understand one another. We
Yeah,
understand our culture, and we historically we're like you could say it's more like a patriarchal society, in which men are more dominant in society. Though we do have equality and shared tasks and so forth, but men are the providers. They manage providing for the family. They are the ones that the entire family looks up to. In fact, in most parts of East Turkistan, until more recently, I guess this is also a trend of part of the globalization trend. Men were the ones that would provide for the family. They would work, they would provide for the family, and women mostly uh, took care of the household and so
sure.
forth. So and so what China does, in fact, one of the reasons that they're sterilizing our women is that in fact the Chinese embassy. This is why momentarily, briefly, they were you could say censored on Twitter, because they took to Twitter and saying, "Oh, we're freeing these Uyghur women from becoming baby making machines. This is what we're doing. This forced sterilization is to liberate these Uyghur women from becoming, baby making machines." This is
Right.
the
Yes.
level of propaganda that they've, used to justify their genocidal
Well,
action.
yeah, so that's funny. So it looks like they do have to take it a step further because your let's say your people are less divided against themselves. So they're doing this a different way. Like here, we just promote abortion. And then women say, "Okay, I'll just kill my babies." But it's still like but that doesn't work in I would assume it's not as effective in with you guys. So instead, they try to they just spin it a different way, and they say, "Well, this is good for you for whatever reason," right? They just try a different thing. It's got a little bit more force behind it. So Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so the China has locked up hundreds of thousands, maybe more, of Uyghur and Turkic men in camps, while I guess leaving the women and children. Like, are the women and children also? Because you said it was mostly men that are put in these camps. Um,
Yeah, well, they
how? Yeah, go ahead.
initially it was men that were initially targeted. Then they expanded it to our entire society. So even women are in the camps.
When
According
they,
to China,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
according according to China's own data, like their white paper, like the Pentagon back in May of 2019, its assessment stated that at least 3 to 4 million Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples have been taken into these concentration camps. Then China hit back and said, "Oh no, these aren't concentration camps. These are vocational training facilities. We're providing them with job training. We're teaching them language. We're civilizing them. We're de-radicalizing them from their extremist thoughts." These are the things that they said, and they in their white paper they stated that between 2014 and the end of 2019 they sent 1.29 million people per year to these concentration camps, so roughly 7.8 million people over the course of that period. And what we know is that disproportionately men are often the higher ones to be targeted because majority of the men during that period they were you couldn't see any men in the street, like there it was almost non-existent. And even the propaganda that the Chinese government would roll out is that they would send government minders. So they've sent 2.2 million Chinese officials, males, to live in our homes while our men are in prison. They sent 2.2 million Chinese officials to live in our homes, to look after our women, and even to sleep with them. This is
Well, of course.
there's no further humiliation than this. And of course, because our men are not there to protect their women, you can expect what's happening. And so those who refuse, the women who refuse the advances of these Chinese, they're essentially the assault and rape and all these other things of these Chinese officials, they are deemed as extremists and radicals and sent to the concentration camps as well. But I would estimate about 70% at least of the people that are interned in the concentration camps, in the prisons, are men. In fact, leaked Chinese government testimonies show that they have forcibly transferred over 500,000, at least 500,000 of our men out of our country into secret prisons across China, where they are essentially being left to die. The Chinese guards are saying, "Oh, they're being left to die. We don't even let them out to see daylight, not even once a month." And so this is the level of attacks and genocidal actions that the Chinese government is undertaking. Of course, then
Right.
there's the children. Not the Chinese government previously, like when I was there in East Turkistan, when I grew up, I was there until 7. During that period, initially this was in 2000. So we would learn. We had the opportunity to learn our language, the Uyghur language, until middle school, and then it would be Chinese. Then in 2003, the Chinese government rolled out a so-called bilingual program, except it's bilingual on paper, and in reality, it's monolingual. Bilingual in the sense that after you graduate high school, if you want to, learn Uyghur when you're in college, you're free to do so. Until then, everything is strictly in Chinese. And so they did this for an entire decade. However, by like 2014, they realized that, even though you forced Uyghur children to attend school and learn Chinese, they're going to return home at the end of the day. They're going to go back to their parents, and their parents are Uyghur. So their parents are going to continue speaking to them in Uyghur. They're going to continue to instill their culture, and try to keep their identity alive. So the Chinese government felt that, oh no, we can't fully assimilate these people at this rate. So then they began taking our children. According to the Chinese government's own data, up until 2019, as of 2019, 890,000 of our children were forcibly taken from their parents and put into state-run boarding schools to be raised as loyal Chinese citizens. And of course, we're not talking about, teenagers. We're talking about kids as small as 3 years old, toddlers being taken. And there are numerous propaganda videos that the Chinese government itself puts out showing our little kids, our toddlers, dressed up in Chinese PLA miniature Chinese uniforms, being instructed by Chinese military officers to become the future soldiers of China, to fight against China's enemies, stuff like that. And they are, they obviously can't contact their relatives, their family members. They've lost every essence of their culture, and they're being instilled to become purely Chinese. This is this is something that is unprecedented. At the international, just at the UN the other day, the UN voted to condemn Russia's forced transfer, forced kidnapping of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children. But that's tens of thousands. But when it comes to our case, it's over 1 million, and the international community is completely silent. No peep.
Have you spoken at any of these or tried to? I mean, I assume you've tried to raise the alarm on this stuff.
Yes, we've repeatedly. We've been talking about this issue for years. It's not like a hidden secret. It's publicly available. The Chinese government isn't hiding that it's forcibly doing all of these things. The Chinese government frames, this is part of the de-radicalization, modernization, development process. We're developing these people. They're backwards. We're uplifting them. All of these dehumanizing terms to legitimize and justify their atrocities.
Yeah. So you say they went after the men first? I believe that 100%. Was there like any pretense that allowed them to just go in there and take the men? Like what
Yeah,
was there? So go ahead.
So our people have been resisting against Chinese occupation since they invaded us back in 1949, and it is historically only targeted Chinese military personnel, has never targeted civilians, because obviously that would undermine our cause, and it's against our own religious teachings. You can't target unarmed people in any form of conflict, no matter what. So this was the case. However, because after 9/11, majority of our people are Muslim, China began to claim that it was fighting against terrorism. That because we're majority Muslim, they essentially took advantage of the global war on terror to demonize our own national independence movement as part of a fight against global terrorism. So still, the international community did not buy into their propaganda, and so China needed a justification to lock up millions of people. You can't you can execute thousands of people a year. You can arrest thousands a year, and the international community will be like, all right, whatever. But when you start mass interning millions of people, that's going to raise alarms, and you have to have some form of justification. So what Chinese intelligence began is, and this is right after Xi Jinping unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative. And if you know anything about the Belt and Road Initiative, it's a multi-trillion-dollar project, infrastructure project, essentially expanding, for Chinese expansion, economically, politically, and further down the road, if need be, militarily.
Yeah.
So, and guess where that runs through? It runs through East Turkistan. We are the cornerstone of that. Without East Turkistan, China has no connection to Central Asia, to the Middle East, to South Asia, to Europe. So for us, for China, East Turkistan is crucially vital. So Xi Jinping announced that in 2013, and then to legitimize, the planned genocide that they're undertaking, the Chinese intelligence created a bunch of false flag bombings, in which there was a couple of bombings at like a train station, a vegetable market, against the Chinese in Chinese located areas, and then they blamed it on Uyghurs. Again, they claimed that, oh, these were Uyghur separatists who were undertaking these bombings, even though even Western experts, people who focused on our cause, are like, why are Uyghurs suddenly going from targeting Chinese military personnel to targeting civilians? This doesn't make any sense, knowing that it would undermine their very cause. Of course, it's not something that Uyghurs themselves did. It's all coordinated by Chinese intelligence, and then using that as a basis that, oh, we're facing a terrorism threat, and more and more Uyghur men are becoming are prone to become radicalized because of the rising colonization, because of the discrimination, systematic discrimination. So they will attack us if we don't de-radicalize them, if we don't re-educate them and take out their extremist thoughts. So this is the basis that China used, and that's why initially, as I stated, when they targeted only the men, because there was a couple of these false flag bombings, the international community bought into that lie, or just turned a blind eye and was like, all right, let's see what's going to come out of this. But by 2016, 2017, our entire population began to become wholesale targeted, and so the international community slowly began to speak out. But other than low level condemnations and some lip service, they haven't really done anything.
Finger wagging. Right. Do you think, just as an aside note, do you think that your religion has anything to do with why China's doing this? It's not just a purely, let's say, pragmatic, if not a completely heartless thing, because you're just an obstacle. I mean, do you think that there is something about your religion that, because I think China is largely secular, but I'm not certain. So
I mean, it's an atheist state, officially. However, no, our issue is not a religious issue. It's not motivated by religion in any way, like or China's targeting us. Targeting us is not motivated because of our part,
right?
Yeah, because if that was the case, there are 15 million ethnically Chinese Muslims. 15 million. Yeah.
Oh, that live in China.
Yeah, they're ethnically Chinese.
Okay.
But they practice, Islam. They're Muslims. They live in, actual China. So China has no, concerns about that. This is not, if it was about religion, you'd be seeing, the Chinese Muslims being locked up in concentration camps and facing genocide. But because the issue is about East Turkistan. It's about controlling our country, our resources, and they need to remove the people there and replace it with the Chinese. And this is what the root of the issue is because of, and that's why they use all types of excuses to target us.
Right. So this is sounds like legitimately a genocide happening on a few different levels. One, they're just taking the men away, which is essentially making it impossible for you guys to reproduce, like within your group. They are replacing those men with their men by sending in these men to live with these Uyghur women, and they're also taking the children and re-educating them and making them into essentially serfs to the Chinese state. Is that fair, all of that I got?
Yeah, I mean, so far the U.S. government, as well as the many governments and parliaments in the EU and even the UN, described it. The U.S. recognized it as genocide. Many EU parliaments recognize it as genocide. The UN, because of China's enormous clout, it should have recognized it as genocide, but because again, China's enormous clout and influence at the UN. So they stated, oh, it's crimes against humanity, but crimes against humanity is still crimes against humanity. It's not something to be taken lightly. Even with that, you don't see any action being taken to stop it. That's the sad reality. And so this genocide has been ongoing as the so-called People's War since May of 2014. We are about to enter into its 12th year.
Mm-hmm. So this is like, okay. So also, I guess you have warned that China is deliberately creating millions of surplus Han men and then exporting them to Central Asia, Russia, Africa, etc., to marry local women and create pro-China elites.
Yeah.
Is
So I mean,
this basically state-sponsored demographic conquest? And what does it mean for the men in those countries? Yeah, go ahead.
It's essentially neo-colonialism at its finest. So China has a very large male population. They don't have as many females because during the Cultural Revolution in Mao's era, they,
The one-child rule. So they were trying to control their population, and there was only there were too many girls. A lot of
their female, babies. So, so this means there's a large male population. And the Belt and Road Initiative, what it is a $1 trillion project. They're building roads, hospitals, railways, ports, different infrastructure projects across the world, not just in East Turkistan, not just in Central Asia, but even in parts of Africa. In fact, one of the African scholars, he warned about this very explicitly. He said, right now, like the Chinese, they're coming and doing all these, but look at who's they're bringing. They're bringing tens of thousands of Chinese males into our country. It's not the Africans, men, that are getting the jobs. We could build those roads. We could build those, hospitals. We could serve as the labor, even if not as, if we're not technically capable of it, we could, serve as manual labor. But of course, that doesn't fit China's agenda, because China needs to find a solution and find wives for these males. But they also need to ensure that, they engage in neocolonialism. So that he said, what the African scholar was warning was that right now, you might think I'm crazy. Right now, there's about, I think it was in Kenya or Nigeria. He said, right now, there's about, 200,000 Chinese here in Africa, in this part of Africa. You might think that's not a whole lot comparable to our size. You might think that's not a whole lot, but many of them are marrying African women, because let's face it, who are our women going to marry? They're not going to marry a guy that doesn't have a job, that can't provide for them. So who has the job? Who has the money? The Chinese men. Now they're having babies. Now these babies, China is in those countries, they're essentially creating little enclaves in those countries where these, mixed, where these married, African/Chinese couples reside in these compounds. They have their own schools, their own, everything is in Chinese. And then they send them, after they get, a little older, they send them to study in China. And he's saying, right now, you might think this is crazy, but come to me in 30, 40 years, and you'll be like, you were right. In 30, 40 years, our ministers will be half Chinese, half African. Our presidents, our prime ministers will be half Chinese, half African. And they will have, they will effectively, they won't be loyal to Africa. They won't be loyal to our countries. They'll be loyal to Beijing. And our countries will effectively answer to Beijing. And this is the strategic, calamity that Africa is going to face in the next coming decades. Mm-hmm. And this is happening all across, again, even in Central Asia, because the Chinese, they're like, oh, we're going to help you build railways. We're going to help you build roads. We're going to help you build all these massive infrastructure projects. But we're going to do it with our own labor. So they bring, hundreds of thousands of Chinese men.
So hundreds of thousands of fighting age, working Chinese men go into distant, like, other countries. They take their jobs from the native population, and they marry into and interbreed with that population as well. And the people bring up, if they say that they have a problem with it, like they don't like this, or it's doing harm, then I guess they get called bigots for it. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, yeah, in
yeah,
one portion, in some countries, yeah, they'll be called bigots. In countries like Central Asia, they're like, oh, you're undermining our friendly relationship with China. Of course, you have corrupt officials who are being paid,
of
to
course.
essentially sell out their own nation's future. Because right now, all they look at is that wad of cash that the Chinese hand them. They don't think
Yes.
about 30, 40 years, like what will my children face, or what will my grandchildren face. They don't think about that.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds really familiar. The stuff that's happening in like this part of the world as well. So, countries, I think you said that countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE and even India have been detaining Uyghur men for years at China's request, sometimes just for wearing an anti-genocide shirt. How common is it for Uyghur men to be disappeared abroad, and what does that say about global men's rights when geopolitics are involved?
In fact, if you look at the statistics of all the Uyghurs abroad that have been detained and deported, you'll find that 99% of them are men. And the reason, because women and children, they get more solidarity. Men, the Chinese government can immediately label as criminals, terrorists, extremists, and no solidarity. So this is the sad reality, is that
Hmm.
men are easy to target, easy to justify as to demonize, in comparison to women and children. So that's why many of the people that are being detained and deported are, like 99% in our case, in the Uyghur case, are men.
Yeah, of course, of course. And most of the people in the labor camps are men as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, they're
and
also.
and oh, I want to get back to the organ harvesting. So, like, this is one of those things that, real quick. I'm sorry, I know you're going to say something. I'll let you go ahead and do that. This is one of those things that a lot of people thought was a bit too far-fetched, but I didn't think it was. So I'm really glad that you brought this up. And it's interesting that you said that the organ harvesting is also mostly happening to men. Is that true?
Yes. So the reason for this is like, if you look at China's own organ harvesting data, the government's own data on that, prior to 2014, in 2013, they claimed that there was about 6,000 voluntary organ transplants. Of course, they call it voluntary, but most of the organ transplants are actually organ harvesting taken from political prisoners that are often executed. In our case, it's majority men. But after 2014, it skyrocketed to over 50,000 per year, to where now it's about 100,000 It's believed that there's about 100,000 organ transplants happening every year. In fact, many wealthy Muslims from the Middle East and other parts of the Muslim world travel to China, and to where they get halal organs, meaning that the organs of those individuals, um, it belonged to a individual who was Muslim, who didn't drink alcohol, who didn't eat pork, etc. And so they are essentially selling us as halal organs. And in fact, it's so easy to get organ transplants in China. You go to China, if you have a lot of money, that is, if you have a lot of money, you go to China. Within 72 hours, they can get you an organ transplant. And where is that coming from? East Turkistan, because many of these uh, organ harvesting facilities are located in East Turkestan. Many of our airports in East Turkestan have special lanes at the airport that say for organ transplants only. And based on the testimonies, and based on testimonies of Chinese security guards and police that were in the camps, as well as victims in those camps, survivors, as well as China's own judicial and other data. Majority of the quote voluntary organ transplant. This is the nice way that the Chinese government tries to whitewash this crime, is claiming that it's voluntary. In fact, when it's not, are males. They're getting it from males. They collected the DNA samples, the voice prints, and retina scans of 36 million of our people between 2016 and 2018 or 2017.
Wow, that's absolutely barbaric. But it makes sense because men are the disposable sex. And like you said, because of Muslim practices, your organs are ripe for use. And I assume that China makes a lot of money doing that, and they don't concern themselves with the ethics of such a practice. So, I guess thank you again for coming on. We because we started late, I'm gonna I went over time. I normally would just go for an hour, but we're just gonna go for an hour for another few more minutes here. Well, first of all, I wanted to point out that a lot of people are learning about these Uyghur camps. I don't know if you like. I don't mean on the international stage with large organizations like governments and the UN, but I mean like normal citizens are learning more and more about this. And it's actually, interestingly enough, thanks to Disney. Did you know that?
Yeah, they filmed parts of Mulan in
And
East
that
Turkistan.
was, people said that they weren't sure, but that was a camp, right? In the
Yeah,
background of that.
and the funny thing is, like, the people being demonized in Mulan, if you remember, like, if you watched it,
Hmm.
um,
No,
Bori Khan.
the original one. I saw the original one, but no.
So Bori Khan, I mean, the Huns, those are actually the Uyghurs. Those are our ancestors. So the reason, like, it explain in the Disney remake, he explains why they're attacking China. He's like, because they killed my father, they took our land. This is a symbolic thing that the Chinese are stating. But even in that, they're stating, oh, it's okay to oppress and you know demonize these people that we invaded and occupied as a bunch of barbarians. So not only did they film the movie, parts of the movie in East Turkistan near the concentration camps, but they also cast our ancestors as evil, and as being that it's justified to
Of course.
brutally suppress these people because they're a bunch of barbarians. This is the narrative that the Chinese government has been propagating into the Chinese mindset, and that's why the average Chinese people, like a lot of Western journalists that tried to go to East Turkestan, when they asked Chinese people, the average Chinese people, what do you think? I heard that they're locking up millions of Uyghurs in these camps. What do you think about that? And they're like, oh, that's great. They're backward barbarians. We're civilizing them. The Chinese government is doing the right thing. They think they want to kick us out of this place, but this is our land now. This is
Hmm.
the answer that these Chinese people are giving. And the journalist was like, do you not feel any sympathy for these people? Like, they're just being you know tortured, persecuted, killed en masse. And they're like, no, they deserve it. This is the unfortunate reality, because again, the Chinese government has long portrayed us as barbarians. Prior to September 11, we were backward barbarians, counter-revolutionaries, ethnic splittists. And then after 9/11, it was like, oh, these are all terrorists.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's well, I think that is starting to change. I don't know if I'm being like naive or overly optimistic, but let me ask, what is next for you guys? Like, what are your goals, or what are you working on right now to get closer to your goals of decolonizing East Turkestan?
So one of the first things that we've been calling for is to recognize East Turkestan, or re-recognize East Turkestan as an occupied country. So in the 1959 U.S. Captive Nations Law, which reaffirms that U.S. solidarity and support for the recovery of independence and liberty of captive nations, and it lists us as Turkestan alongside Tibet. However, after the U.S.-China, U.S.-China under Nixon, they patched things up, or the U.S. opened up to China under the Nixon administration. One of the key things that China requested or demanded was, you're no longer ever going to mention East Turkestan. You're no longer going to talk about this. And so after that, there was complete silence. So we're trying to get people, as part of decolonization, is to start calling our country by its true name, East Turkestan. We're not Chinese minorities. We're not Chinese Muslims. We don't have any ethnic, religious, cultural, or even racial connection to the Chinese. We're Indo-European, whereas the Chinese are, East Asiatic Asians. We're two, even racially, we're two complete different races, you could say. So, like, the Chinese call our country by the term Xinjiang, which literally translates as the new territory. So it in itself shows you that this is a Chinese occupied territory. So we're calling for recognition of that. Recognition of our right to self-determination, like every other nation, and our right to decolonization. We're, asking for the public, the governments, the people to lobby their governments, to press their governments to, offer us the same level of support that, that they've given to other oppressed peoples, and ultimately to recognize that, genocide is not going to stop itself. We have to address the root. Why is this genocide happening? It's because China is occupying and colonizing our country, and the only solution to that is by restoring our independence, by restoring our national self-determination and sovereignty. And so the first step is, again, recognition of East Turkestan's status, true status, support and recognition of our right to self-determination, and then support for our independence through international institutions and international laws, and providing us with political, financial, moral, diplomatic support that that they've given to other nations.
Yeah, and then it would, well, obviously restore, like, order back to your people, like putting the family back together, the man back in the home, that kind of thing. Which is, like how it should be. So, I mean, I guess I got one last question. What did you learn about what happened to your family members? Because this all started when they started disappearing. So what did you learn about what happened to them?
So majority of the my male relatives, they were sent to the concentration camps. Many were actually sentenced to anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. I have a cousin who was sentenced 25 years in prison, and he was only 21 at the time, on so-called separatism allegations or accusations. I had relatives that died in the camps. We heard that 2 of them died in the concentration camps, and another 2 were killed in the prison. And this is the ones that we could get some information out of, information from, based on other relatives who lived across the border in Central Asia, and who were engaging in who have business partners in those countries that went back and forth between East Turkestan, and they were able to get these snippets of information out. But it was like years after that we heard that they died several years ago, and now we're hearing it in like 2025, 2024, even though they've been they've been
the
killed.
News of their passing is like coming way later, and well, it's like, can you even, like, how do you grieve, I guess? So that's awful.
You live in the 21st century. You should be able to contact anyone easily. But the thing is, in East Turkestan, one of the reasons that they take you into the camps to be, quote, re-educated, is if you have contact with anyone overseas. So if you have relatives overseas and you try to contact them, or you have contacted them, you're going into the camp because you're not, quote, loyal according to the Chinese state.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, then what do you what is there anything that you wanted to tell people that are watching that I did not ask you about?
Well, I mean, I think we pretty much covered the gist of it, but of course, this is not just what's happening to East Turkestan. In fact, what China is doing, and what, certain, powers that be, malign powers that be, what they want to do is they are using East Turkestan as a a test lab to test all of these different types of surveillance, AI, facial recognition, surveillance tools, and so forth, and other policies that they want to, implement in other parts of the world, especially authoritarian regimes. And so, if the people of the world don't wake up, if they don't oppose this, it might not be immediate, but a day might come where they will be living or witnessing a similar situation in their happening to them, or if not to them, then maybe to their children. So this is why it's important for the international community, for people all across the world, to oppose this, not just because of what's happening to the Uyghurs, but oppose it so that they don't face what's happening to us, so they don't become the next Uyghurs.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hope that you can get on much larger platforms than ours so that more people will see this, because I think this story is really important. But I really am appreciative that you did come on our show to talk about this with us. And yeah, I mean, thanks so much for sharing this information. It's like I said, it's really terrible what's happened, and I hope that we can get some, some resolutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you guys for watching the show. So I put links to your socials in the description of this video, so people can reach you, and maybe I can try to like get somebody like to host you, that maybe it'll reach more people. I think that this is like really important stuff. And have you been on any other, like, on the news or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of interviews, especially before the Ukraine conflict broke out, before the war in Ukraine broke out. We were actually getting some attention. That's when we got our genocide recognition. Governments were condemning what was happening, and then the war in Ukraine erupted, and of course, governments are afraid to, they're afraid to upset China because they know China is supplying, supporting Russia, and so they think that if they appease China, that appease China and refrain from criticizing China, that China will listen to their pleas to stop supporting Russia. Can you pressure Putin to stop? They're not. No, China. Putin went to the Beijing Winter Olympics, and it was there where the Winter Olympics in China, and it was there that she pretty much gave the green light, saying, "I got your back. Go do this," because she needed something. Xi Jinping needed something to distract the international community from the pressure that it was receiving or from the mounting pressure that it was receiving over the Uyghur genocide, because we had
Hmm.
governments recognizing it as genocide. Dozens of countries at the UN, signed joint statements condemning it. There was, a lot of media attention, at the time, and so to distract from that, this is this is what's been going on, and so all these other conflicts erupted, and so China has been riding the wave and essentially, um, be getting away with all of these crimes with no accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to say good luck Sully, I'm really and appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope we'll have you on again soon, and like talk about some other things, you know, like any developments that happen and whatnot. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right. No, thank you so much. All right, and thank you guys watching at home for joining us. This has been the Fireside Chat. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed in the show today, and please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much again for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.